Portal 2 is one of the most consistently surprising games I've ever played. This game was catching me off guard right from the very first seconds of playing it, and it continued to all the way to the very end. And that's just one of the many reasons the game has remained one of my favorites ever made. Before Portal 2, I had never heard of Valve, the original Portal, or anything related. I was completely unfamiliar with the types of games that Valve made or the tone of Portal 1's narrative. Then, in 2011, I see this ad on TV. This ad is one of the most deceptively brilliant I've ever seen. It's instantly captivating with its simple conveyance of the game's main mechanic, and I was instantly sold after watching it. The commercial ends with a friendly, inviting robotic voice saying,
"We're going to have fun with science."
And though she wasn't technically lying, I soon found out that Portal 2 wouldn't be the lighthearted puzzle romp I assumed it would be. Throughout its test chambers, Portal 2 tells a surprisingly dark story, one tackling themes of the fragility of life, corruption from power, and hopelessness. It's filled with humor and wit, but it also has the capacity to be sad and dire. It had me completely invested the entire time, which was such a pleasant surprise considering I wasn't really expecting any sort of story from this game at all. That friendly robotic voice from the commercial turned out to be GLaDOS, the corrupt AI in control of Aperture Science that murdered almost all of its employees and kept several others to complete test chambers for the rest of their lives. Until she gets bored and kills them too. So right off the bat, you could see why I'd be caught off guard when first playing this game. And this was just the first of many surprises for me. As the game continues, the plot changes things up in so many different ways, constantly keeping the player on their toes and never letting them predict for a second what's going to happen next. Wheatley's arc in the game is a perfect example of this. He begins as your friendly guide throughout the facility as you try to escape together. Then he's seemingly killed off. Then he comes back, transfers his body with GLaDOS, and just when you think you're finally about to escape, Wheatley turns into the new main antagonist, and you realize the game is only halfway over. The game is full of plenty of other great curveballs throughout that kept me guessing, such as GLaDOS' true origins, the part where Wheatley kills you, defeating Wheatley by putting a portal on the moon, and GLaDOS' apparent shift back to evil, before finally giving up and setting you free. And the best part of all of this is that the character you play as, Chell, I don't know, doesn't speak a single word the entire game. She's a blank slate, and a perfect window for us to experience the game world and its story for ourselves. GLaDOS does imply that Chell may have some tragic backstory relating to Aperture Science and her parents, but this isn't explored too deeply, and is kept vague enough for us to believe she might just be making it all up to mess with us, just like she has multiple other times in the past. There are some other hints about Chell's backstory hidden throughout the game, but you'd have to really go out of your way to find them on your first playthrough. The game is even self-aware about the fact that it keeps surprising the player. There's an entire section of the game where GLaDOS keeps teasing a big surprise she has for you.
I bet you think I forgot about your surprise. I didn't. In fact, we're headed to your surprise right now.
And then...
Initiating surprise in 3, 2, 1. I made it all up. Surprise.
Yup, the first time the game actually tells you to expect a curveball, and then nothing. And then GLaDOS starts talking about a real surprise.
I've got a surprise for you after this next test. Not a fake, tragic surprise like last time. A real surprise.
And before you even get to see what it was, Wheatley bursts into the chamber to initiate an unexpected escape sequence.
Hey, buddy! I'm speaking in an accent that is beyond her range of hearing.
So, in essence, the game asks you to expect to be surprised, only to surprise you with no surprise, then tease another surprise, and surprise you with another surprise right after you expected the real surprise to not come until the next chamber. Confused? I don't blame you. But that's the genius of this game. The writing is so smart that it knows the player will expect to be thrown for a loop while playing it, and instead of becoming predictable, it uses that to its advantage to subvert expectations even further. The unexpected elements don't end with the game's story or writing either. In terms of gameplay, the game constantly finds new ways to combine its handful of puzzle elements in each chamber. It starts off pretty simple, but the design of the chambers evolves significantly as the game goes on, and the different mechanics are explored in so many unique ways across them that the game never ends up feeling repetitive or samey, despite the fact that you're doing the same thing unlocking doors and making it to the exit, for pretty much the entire game. But, of course, as soon as you start to get used to the small contained test chambers, the game sends you behind the scenes of those chambers, and then into the vast open areas in the underbelly of the facility, before sending you back into contained test chambers again. None of the levels end up feeling stale, and the game overall never loses steam because it constantly changes things up just before you'd get sick of what it offers. And for a game with such a small amount of mechanics compared to so many other games, that's really something to admire. Portal 2 really is one of the smartest games ever made. I was always curious to see where it would head next in terms of both the gameplay and the story, and despite the fact that once you've played it you know all the solutions to the puzzles, I've replayed the campaign probably a dozen times just because I love the characters and their interactions so much. I originally got the game on PS3, and I just recently got it on Steam to play community-made test chambers, something I deeply regret not doing earlier. And though I now have nearly endless amounts of awesome test chambers to play, I can't help but still be bummed about the state of Portal-related things. Valve doesn't really make games like they used to due to the success of Steam, leaving all of their major franchises essentially dead in the water. At the same time, aside from fan creations, there aren't really any developers currently that make games the same way Valve did. Their style was something truly special, and it's heartbreaking that it's become pretty much lost in the modern gaming landscape. It's highly doubtful that we'll ever see another Portal game, but at the very least, I'm glad we got the Portal games that we have. They're hilarious, fun, inventive, and genius, and every time I revisit them, I'm reminded of just how clever they really were.
The end.